14th Kino Kingdom now. And I know that I'm just going to get this out the way straight away because I know we don't cover TV series, but I just want to tell everyone out there to not watch Candle Cove on Amazon Prime. It's weird that how a single 300-word piece of flash fiction doesn't translate well into a 4.5-hour TV series, and it's a lot of film. Bizarre.
Yeah. So that would really just naturally flesh itself out, wouldn't you?
It was so many moments of just me staring, thinking, "Are you going to stop staring at fields of corn and move the plot forwards, or should I just get ready for more of this?" I paid for it as well, which got on my nerves even more.
Ooh. Yeah. Atmosphere building, that's what that is. Or, in other words, boredom.
There's a bit in it that proves how much they just assume people's attention is going to wander because it's just so meandering. There's a bit where the main guy in it, is having all these visions and stuff, and he's moved in with his mother. So he's about 40, his mother's about 60, putting on an unconvincing American accent because she's clearly from London. And there's a bit where he opens the window and he sees his daughter out there, and I think her name's like Leah. And his mother says, "Who's that out there on the road?" And he says, "It's Leah, my daughter." And I thought she'd probably know who that is. She would probably know when you said
recognize Leah, that person by name.
Yeah, and sight. So yeah, it's almost like as if they just expect the viewer to be like, "Oh yeah, I remember now." Okay, so they know we're going to be bored. So don't watch Candle Cove. It's crap. And weirdly, it's got really high ratings as well on like Metacritic and Rotten Tomatoes. No idea why. Boring. Right. So, this is a pretty of a brief week from me because I've only got 6 films. Actually, is that line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Yes. So I've got Host, not that one. Project Power, Hotel Artemis, Incoming, Night Train to Terror, and Trick.
I was going to watch Night Train to Terror.
I should have.
But it's only on Shudder.
Oh, is it Shudder I saw it on? I thought it was Amazon Prime.
I'm too cheap to pay for that yet.
Oh my God, you are missing. Well, we'll obviously get to it.
When I finish scraping the barrel of Amazon's horror collection, then I surely will.
Oh yeah, you'll do it. It's got to be on this somewhere else. I would. It is a film I would own. Oh, I would own like on a Steelbook Blu-ray happily.
Yeah. Well, I did. Yeah. I did. Yeah. Well, we'll get into that because I mean, I have bought a Blu-ray this week, but I'll let you know about that anyway. So I've got 7 films this time around. I have Warrior, The Lighthouse, Fight Club, Gangs of New York, The Silence, The Toolbox Murders, and Hairspray.
You watch it. You cheated now. You're looking at like decent big budget films. Well, I'm the one. It's like the coin is tossed, and now I'm watching stuff like Incoming and Night Train to Terror.
I like the way you're describing the Toolbox Murders as big budget, mainstream. I can't wait to talk.
I watched the Toolbox Murders years ago, and I remember it was like a Video Nasty VHS cut version, and it had just blue screen for minutes at a time when there was obviously horrific things going on. Yeah.
Wow.
It was just blue screen with no sound, and I was like, well, okay, obviously I shouldn't be watching this. I mean, I was probably too young to watch it anyway, but weirdly, it was more terrifying just when like you see someone, I don't know, like lift up a chisel to someone's mouth, and then it cuts to blue screen, and then your imagination just fills in the gaps, and then you get upset.
Yeah. Well, this was the uncut version.
So, before we, because you may as well go first because you've obviously got an extra film, and we haven't got an action film this week because Chris is away, so we haven't watched one. But we have got sponsorship this week.
Okay.
I managed to nail some down.
You're really wheeling and dealing, aren't you? So well done.
It's nice to just go on. I just go on like there's like an advertising website. You just say, oh look, if anyone wants to help out with the bandwidth cost for the podcast, and you get some quite nice big names. Like for instance, this week we're sponsored by Henry Cavill's Mirror World. Hi, I'm Henry Cavill. Do you want to see my ass? I know I do, and have, and will again. All thanks to my Mirror World. For price to be decided upon during booking, you can come into my Mirror World, a cavernous room that I've constructed in a warehouse in Stratford-upon-Avon, and stand in the centre, where you'll be surrounded by over 1,000 carefully placed mirrors. I will be wearing arseless chaps, like that bloke out of Mad Max, and will stand in such a way that my arse is reflected into the many mirrors in my mirror world. I will remain in this position for 16 hours. Well, what are you waiting for? Go to www.henrysmirrorworld.com. You'd be an arse to miss it. And then there's we don't normally have this, but Henry Cavill's, I don't know if it's his legal team, of putting like a legal disclaimer. So I'll read that out as well so we don't get in trouble.
Probably best.
So, legal disclaimer. Please note, due to the unique layout of Henry's mirror world, in order for Henry's arse to be reflected accordingly, he will be standing in front of you around 3 feet away. You must not look directly at Henry's arse. Only look at the reflection of it around you. We cannot be held responsible for what happens should you look directly at Henry's ass. My wife looked at it once, and now all she does is draw pictures of Nicholas Lyndhurst on a yacht, rubbing peanut butter onto a wasp's nest, laughing and ignoring the angry stinging of the furious insects. So that's sponsored this week by Henry Cavill's Mirror World.
That's amazing. I didn't even know it existed, but I suppose during COVID-19, everyone, out of work actors need to do something to tide them over, I suppose. So it makes sense.
The thing is as well, although that sounds, like Henry Cavill's Mirror World does sound like it would cost a lot of money, I can assume you're renting out the money he earns, renting out like a warehouse in Stratford-upon-Avon, placing a load of mirrors up very carefully, obviously, so it's reflected perfectly, and then just taking his, pulling his arse out.
Yeah,
it's quite a kind of low maintenance way of making up the money while he's not, filming.
Yeah, it's pretty simple setup, really, isn't it? Oh, that's great. Well, I mean, it's news to me, and I think I'll be paying a visit.
Yeah, I mean,
between seasons of The Witcher.
Pop up to Stratford and get to know the man himself. So that's www.henrysmirrorworld.com. So yeah, Rupert, I mean, if you want to crack on with your first film, which is
Warrior from 2011.
Is this the one with Tom Hardy and Nick Nolte in it?
It is.
I've not seen it. Oh, John, how have I not seen that? That's really bizarre. Yeah.
It's about this family, the Conlons. They are Irish American, and both the brothers, played by Tom Hardy and Joel Edgerton, they've fallen out with their father, played by Nick Nolte, who he was previously an alcoholic, so he didn't treat them particularly well. So Tom Hardy he plays an Iraq veteran who is very much internalizing his rage, whereas Joel Edgerton's character is a family man. Meanwhile, Nick Nolte, he's trying to reach out to his estranged sons. So Joel Edgerton's character, Tommy, not Tommy, he's Brendan, sorry. Tom Hardy's character, he needs the money from this MMA tournament to give to the wife of his fallen war comrade. Whereas Brendan, Joel Edgerton's character, needs the money to save his house, basically his family. And so they're both training for this tournament. Nick Nolte, the father, trains Tom Hardy, and Joel Edgerton is trained by none other than Frank Grillo. Good. So you can see it's some of my favorite gruff, manly actors in this, and they're already good. I was thinking, like, between this and Lawless and Mad Max Fury Road, Tom Hardy must have said about 10 words in all his films in that period. It's ridiculous.
Is he quiet in this film?
He grunts and mumbles. But it's a really strong acting trio, obviously. Joel Edgerton, Tom Hardy, and Nick Nolte. He's directed by Gavin O'Connor, who's a decent director. He also did The Accountant, which had its flaws, but it was pretty competently made. This has quite a kind of raw, realist style, and the fights are pretty visceral.
Well, with the physicality, because I'm just thinking, we know Tom Hardy can buff up, but I'm thinking MMA fighters. Is Joel Edgerton, is he believable as an MMA fighter?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
He's kind of the underdog in it anyway, because they both are ex-fighters. They kind of gone their own way now. Tom Hardy is extremely buff, but Joel Edgerton, he's very, very lean, and yeah, he looks powerful, sort of thing, and it is believable.
Cool.
I think it's, in a way, it must have been harder to do this stuff than, say, a boxing film, because this is people almost barefisted, punch each other, doing some pretty major kicks and stuff. So it's quite impressive.
Cool.
I think that the filmmakers, I think Gavin O'Connor, he's aware that people will know where the film will end up, because you've got these two brothers going into this tournament together. And so it's pretty clear where it's going to go. So what he does, which is quite wisely does, is for the first 90 minutes or so, he's basically building up the stakes between the characters, between the brothers especially, and via their really... Nick Nolte is the father. He's such a sad man. He's so kind of pathetic. He's so desperate to for their approval, and yet they both completely disregard him and just treat him as a total failure as a father. And he's so broken. And the thing is, he's not drinking anymore. And there's going to be a point at which he's gonna break.
Reach for the can of skull. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, it takes a lot of time building up the kind of in the relationships between the characters. So by the time the inevitable showdown happens, it does have real kind of emotional impact. There's a scene where Tom Hardy helps Nick Nolte into bed, which is just an absolute killer. It's just so sad, that scene. No words, just like an old man, just really breathing heavily, being carried to bed by his son. Yes. And yeah, I guess with any sports fighting movie, there's not really that many places it can go in terms of narrative. It's always going to end up with a big tournament and a kind of big showdown. So what differentiates them is the filmmaking craft, the script, and the performances. And on all those terms, I'd say that Warrior is pretty much bang on. It is an unusually emotionally engaging fight film. But it also does have plenty of decent fight scenes.
I was gonna say, is it like them training and leading up to it, or is it like an actual tournament where it shows them getting to the end, as opposed to just it's an arranged fight and then?
Yeah, it does. It's not like it's just pure talking build up and character development all the way there. There are fights along the way, sort of thing. But I just think it really does a good job of building up the stakes so that it really matters what happens at the end. So in that regard, very good. Yeah, I think it's a very, very competent film, and it is recommended.
Oh, nice. This is one, I think I've got a feeling that the reason I haven't watched it with that trio of heroes in it is because it struck me as it could be a sort of family drama, and I don't like crying. So I just think, is it going to make me cry? Especially because Nick Nolte's in it. So I've always probably will watch it one day when I'm more emotionally robust. But
yeah, it's very much it's very much about brothers and fathers and sons. It's one of those movies which is almost designed to allow men to cry.
Oh, okay, then I will watch it at some point, but I'm just not entirely sure when. What I did get around to watching is a film called Host, not that one. This isn't the Korean film from a while ago. This is a new low-budget horror film that was... I don't know what you call them, like a screen view horror? When it's like the camera's on like a webcam horror thing? Oh. There must be a name for that genre. We should make one up. Bert.
Gerald.
Gerald Lancaster. It's 60 minutes, which is good. This was on Shudder, I think, and it is a film that's made. It's obviously been made over the COVID lockdown period, because that very much features the whole. It is quite clever, actually, and quite well done. How it all
fast tracked, isn't it?
They must have washed it out, honestly. So I think it's 5 girls and one dude who all meet up for this sort of online seance thing that one of them has arranged. They're all in different parts of the world, And so it's sort of, it's daytime in some places, night in other, and you sort of you're in the Zoom chat with them, and it's quite clever because you know that the when the film starts and gets going, after like I think it's 40 minutes, Zoom calls just time out and you have to all log in again. That is a sort of feature in it as well. So they really just, and it's quite cool. When I was watching it, I was just sort of quietly impressed by the fact that, fair play, they've really stuck to their guns and obviously all made this completely separate from each other and made it all virtually, and I quite like that. Was quite a neat idea. And although it's 60 minutes, it pumps along, and the seance goes horribly wrong within seconds of it starting. And it is quite spooky, and there are some really cool moments and some jump scares, but most of it is just tension building. And the effects are pretty cool as well. And again, I was all the more impressed by it because it was all made over a distance. So if you a throwaway horror 60 minutes, I wouldn't watch it again, but I am glad I watched it, and I would recommend it for people who like low budget horrors with like a high concept sort of thing.
Is it well acted?
Yeah, it's pretty naturalistically acted. It's not. They're all kind of sort of friends that have known each other for a while, so there's a lot of banter going on. There's nothing really. It's basically them sort of chatting and then panicking. So it's
because I feel that these sorts of films do rest very heavily on the quality of the performance, really, don't they? Because there's nothing else to.
There's nothing. Yeah, you're literally looking at their face. So yeah, but I think there's no bad actors in it. It's again, although it does rely on the quality of the performance, it's limited, isn't it? What that person can do. So I didn't notice anything that made me think, hang on, banger, this isn't very good. And to be honest, it bangs along so quickly anyway. By the time you question anything, it's over with. So the Host, I recommend.
So it's called Host, and it's on Shudder.
Shudder, which obviously my trial has definitely ended now, so that's it. That's it. No more Shudder for this podcast. I gotta say, this is like the third between that. I think it was called Searching and Dark Web. Unfriended Dark Web. I've watched 3 of these.
Gerald Lancasters.
I don't know what you call them. Gerald Lancasters, and they've all been pretty good and all taking a different approach to things. So it's one of those things that I think I would, if I come across a few more, I would be intrigued to watch them because I haven't been let down yet. Yeah,
it seems like a little new kind of found footage type thing, which will no doubt produce some very good examples and then become very tiresome in the near future. You know what's going to happen. You can't wait.
So that's Host. 60 minutes of fun and frolics and fright.
Oh, nice. I can go on the poster. So, from one horror to another, The Lighthouse, which I watched on Amazon and paid for.
I believe you paid £1.99 for it.
I did, because they're still not quite ready to just unleash it.
This is one that's very much on my radar, so I'm looking forward to hear what you say about this.
Yeah, so this is Robert Eggers' follow-up to The Witch. And it has a similar kind of ye olde period setting, although this is much later. This is set in the 1890s. There are literally 2 characters, both named Thomas, played by Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe. Willem Dafoe is the saltiest sea dog you've ever seen. He's a veteran lighthouse keeper. Robert Pattinson is the kind of newbie, and he just gets all these awful jobs to do constantly. It's quite funny, like how terrible the jobs are that he has to do, and so dangerous, some of them. Like dangling off this. Sorry.
What accents are they speaking? Is it like British?
Well, it's kind of Irish, Cornish, something like real salty kind of Atlantic accents, basically. So it's basically 2 hours of these men, particularly Robert Pattinson, going mad. He has these visions of a really creepy mermaid, and at times he will see Willem Dafoe going up to the lighthouse, just like in kind of Danny Boyle's Sunshine. He goes up to the light itself at the top and gyrates up there, and he may possibly be mutating into a kind of Lovecraftian monster, which is amazing.
You don't want that from a workmate, do you?
No, you don't, do you? The first thing you really notice, the way it's filmed. It's filmed in 35mm black and white, and the ratio, the actual shape of the screen, is almost perfectly square. And it's a really, really interesting combination because, like, there's this thing about confinement, and this is definitely a theme of the film. But it works so well when you've got the monochrome, right? And like this is the perfect film to really test out 4K, because the use of blacks in this film, like in some scenes, you've obviously got these big black sidebars where the actual frame is cut off, but within the frame itself, it will be filled with just pure blackness and just a candle light kind of blooming out of the middle of the screen with their faces in it and stuff. And so it's almost like the blacks bleed into the sidebars. It's really, really, this really confining claustrophobic effect is quite amazing. In a way, I suppose it can possibly highlight the limitations of 4K when it's streamed, because 4K when it's streamed is still pixelated. I'm just going to say it. It's not as good as you see on a disc, but there you go. What are you going to do? If it was going to be as good as you see on a disc, then it would have to be, you'd be streaming 100 gigabytes or whatever over the internet. Anyway, so, but yeah, the use of language is really, just like in The Witch, if you remember, it was like, it had this very authentic period language, and it's the same here, particularly from Willem Dafoe. It's amazing. He had these really long, sort of pseudo-poetic, pseudo-biblical speeches about the power of the sea. And there's one kind of famous speech he makes where it's like he's lit from below and he's got really wide eyes and he does not blink for 2 minutes. It's incredible. And he just keeps ranting on. It's a pure art house horror movie. If you're looking for kind of narrative tightness, or like narrative discipline, sort of regular twists and turns, there's not really any of that, but it's really all about, if you love kind of just really, really dark, heavy mood and rich art design, and the kind of horror of the mind, then it's really, really, it's a wonderful nightmare. So it's also surprisingly funny as well, I found.
Like extremely darkly funny.
Yeah. There's one scene where Robert Pattinson, one of his awful jobs, he has to like carry out the slop buckets. He carries them out, and you see him like he is walking through a storm. The wind is howling and it's coming at him, and he's carrying these buckets along like the coast, like really rugged coast. And you just watch him for about 30 seconds walking on the coast, gets to the edge, and obviously he goes to like throw the bucket into the water, and the wind just sweeps it back at him. He just gets covered in fecal matter. It's amazing. It's so funny. But yeah,
he's like in the distance as well when that happens.
And he just like, you just hear him just under his breath say shit, because I had to have the subtitles on, because like the language is, the accents are so thick, and like and the language is so strange that I just had to have the subtitles on to understand what they're saying. Brilliant.
The thing, I suppose, though, having the subtitles on when you're watching a film that's evocative of the turn of the century, it kind of, I guess it would just work with it.
Yes. Yeah, because it's like some of the way they use language and their accents almost makes it seem like a foreign language anyway. But yeah, it's really good.
Is it in it? Does it use music at all, or is it?
I honestly can't remember. What does it? I think it uses like old sea shanties and stuff.
I'm gonna have to watch this tonight, aren't I?
And possibly some like ethereal kind of ambient music. I don't remember the music, put it that way. But I suspect it probably did have some. Maybe it just wasn't intrusive or anything.
This is the thing. I find sometimes if I can't remember the music, which actually happens to a film, like when I think about music from a film and I can't remember it, I assume that's a good thing. Because it didn't piss me off.
I think so. I think it's more about the sound design apart from anything, because the constant howling of the wind, and you've got this this kind of foghorn sound, which is all through the film. like it's a regular foghorn sound. I guess they must have had that in tandem with the light, obviously spinning, so ships would not only see it but hear it before they hit the rocks or whatever. But yeah, and it's got this really, really strange predilection with seagulls, because there's this myth that the seagulls are they're the embodiment of the souls of fallen sailors. And that becomes quite an amusing thing later on, because Robert Pattinson is absolutely tormented by these seagulls, and he really wants to kill one of them. It's a very good film. It's very much in the kind of vein of The Witch, probably a little bit funnier, I'd say, probably talkier.
Well, in all fairness, The Witch wasn't really laugh out loud, knee slapping in Benny Hill territory, was it?
But this, it's as unique, I would say.
I suppose as well, if you're not dealing with horror involving children, it gives you more freedom for comedy, because, like you say, you can do these horrendous things to adults and you can still have a humorous slant on it.
Yes. Robert Pattinson has a rough time, and it's funny in its pure misery, darkness. And I can't wait for Robert Eggers' next film, which is about Vikings, I think. And he's managed to bring Bjork out of acting retirement for it, which is quite exciting. So
you like Vikings, you do, Rupert.
Interesting.
Speaking of old Bobby Pat, did you watch the Batman trailer?
I did watch the Batman trailer.
Did you notice that it featured Nirvana's Something in the Way?
I did notice it featured Nirvana.
My trousers. I said to Faye, "Where are my trousers? Where have they gone?" And she said, "You've never had trousers." So when I watched that, I was like, "Oh, haven't I? That's why I'm always a bit chilly." But no, I watched that trailer, and it reminded me a lot of The Crow.
Yeah.
A lot of the visuals and stuff. So there's someone on Twitter I saw a few days ago saying, "Oh, is it just me, or is everyone just sick of Batman?" I thought, I'm not. Not at all. Which is weird, because to me the whole Ben Affleck Batman basically completely passed me by, because I just didn't watch any of the films. So it's almost like it didn't happen for me.
Well, you're going to get another chance to see Ben Affleck when he is in The Flash, which apparently Dave informs me that it is based on Flashpoint. So it's got a lot of multiverse type stuff. And so this is where the Flash will be meeting other Batmans, including Michael Keaton. So we'll see how that goes. I'm guessing Christian Bale isn't coming back for it. I don't know.
In the Flashpoint Paradox animated series, video, James Woods plays one of them, and I'm pretty sure they probably wouldn't get him in for anything at the moment.
Perhaps not. Yeah. So anyway, The Lighthouse is on Prime for $1.99 at the moment, or I'm guessing it's going to come to it free in the near future, but it's definitely worth it. But make sure you try and watch it with a really good connection in 4K.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, then I'll do that with them. With the streaming, can you, if you buffer it, if you pause it, would that improve it?
No, although I don't know. You can obviously download films, but I'm still not sure you're going to get the full like true 4K experience or not. Maybe you will do visually, but another thing is that it's the sound quality. I mean, like there is a clear difference when it comes to like sound, like image quality, but definitely sound quality when it comes to even Blu-rays are significantly better. It matters less with older films, but something like this, yeah, you want to watch it in the best format possible, I would say. But it's still very good anyway.
I watched Netflix's Project Power with Jamie Foxx a few days ago. And you must have seen this advertised. It's all over Netflix at the moment.
Yeah, she's got Joseph Gordon-Levitt in it.
Yes, it has. So I didn't realize until recently how much I liked him, and how he's actually everything he's ever been in. I've really liked, going back to Brick. I think that was like 2008 or 7 or something.
Even The Dark Knight Rises.
I've never made it that far in the film where he turns up. I've turned it off 3 times before the 40-minute mark, Rupert. So yeah, Project Power is Jamie Foxx plays a character called the Major, and he lives in I guess it's an LA where this pill called Power, which you twist and just put in your gob and swallow, gives you a sort of random power. I say random. It gives you a power for 5 minutes, but whatever power you get the first time, you keep getting. If you burst into flames and you turn into Johnny Storm from the Fantastic Four, every time you take the pill, that same thing will happen. And Joseph Gordon-Levitt plays a cop who is after the pills as well for sort of unknown reasons. Special effects are pretty cool, and it's just like I said, it's just really enjoyable watching him track down these people, and everyone's taking these pills around him and just seeing what happens. But also there's a female character in it, a young girl who's I guess she's 15 or 16, who I was a bit concerned because I thought, this is like quite a cool superhero-y action film. Do I want a child being dragged around slow and everything? But it's actually, that part of it's handled pretty well, and it's written into the plot nicely. It's not just like a 90-minute irritating escort mission.
Right.
So
I'm looking at you, Line of Duty.
Yes. So no, this is, a lot of the film is primarily set at night as well, so it's really nicely lit, and it's like quite a booming sound design to it as well. And I really liked it. It's not a film I probably return to, but it's on Netflix, Project Power, and it's for a start, it was good to see Jamie Foxx in a film again, because I haven't seen him in one for a long time, it seems to be. And yeah, it's just like a cool, like 90-minute action film. So get on that bus.
So, Joseph Gordon-Levitt is good in it?
Joseph Gordon-Levitt, he's quite slight, and to see him sort of cast as like a hard-boiled cop or whatever, I don't know, he seems to get away with it now because he does throw himself into things, and he's so likable.
Yeah, he does throw himself into things. I remember seeing him. Well, the first film role I saw him in was Mysterious Skin, and if you know what that's about, then you have to throw yourself into that. Like, it's a full-on film about child abuse and rent boys and all sorts. So yeah, he didn't mess about there. But he's fine. Yeah, in everything he's in, he always gives it his all. I mean, he certainly was not the worst thing about The Dark Knight Rises. The worst thing about The Dark Knight Rises, where do you start that? The whole narrative, the turgid nature of the narrative, the fact that Bane they've taken what is essentially just a physical threat and turned him into this weird, verbose, like soapboxing, like spokesperson. The whole stuff with Talia is just so mishandled, and her death is awful. One of the worst deaths in movie history. Everything at the end doesn't make sense. It's got that really irritating thing that, well, Christopher Nolan, what he does, he will always have these overlapping action scenes. And as we saw in Inception, it can work very well if all of the action scenes are as interesting as each other. But in Dark Knight Rises, it really doesn't work at all, because you've got some really boring stuff happening at the same time as really exciting stuff, and it's like, stop cutting away, yeah, it's pretty drab around.
I don't think I'll ever watch that film. I don't think I'll ever be able to sit through it.
Yeah,
every time I've tried to watch it, I've been bored.
Yeah,
and there's always like 2.5 hours left, and you think, oh, come on.
It is.
So I'm happy with that.
It's a very long film. Yes. So okay.
So that was Project Power. So Project Power, good flick.
Yes. Good. And that's a Netflix original, I think.
It is indeed.
Okay. Well, I'll move on to Fight Club then, which is on Prime. And Fight Club was made in 1999, and it was, for a certain generation, I suppose it was quite a formative film, really, alongside The Matrix, which obviously came out the same year. And I think both films rest on this basic idea that there is another way of perceiving the world, essentially, and perhaps another way of living in the world, although I'm not sure anyone did on the basis of these, but there you go. So Edward Norton plays the narrator, who is this regular guy with a dull office job, and he looks for meaning in these meeting groups for alcoholics and cancer sufferers, and there he meets his equal, the equally mischievous Marla, played by Helena Bonham Carter, very much cast against type. Anyway, one day, Edward Norton, he returns to his apartment to find out it has exploded and his IKEA dream is over. He meets this guy called Tyler Durden, played by Brad Pitt, and they have a play fight in a parking lot. And anyway, Edward Norton, he loves the unfettered free will of Tyler Durden and moves into this horrible squat with him, really disgusting squat. And from there, Fight Club takes off, basically. Starts off with just men scrapping, getting rid of their repressed rage, and it transforms into this sort of anti-establishment movement. They start out with pranks like graffiti and art destruction and just starting fights with random strangers, but then it becomes more dangerous and more violent. And basically Edward Norton is waking up to the fact that Tyler Durden wants to see the world literally burn. So Fight Club, it's kind of the zenith of that pseudo-anarchic movement of the 1990s, which kind of began with indie films, and by the end of the decade, that indie spirit was coming into the mainstream much more. And then I suppose you could say in the 2000s, comic book movies kind of swung the dial back towards more conservative values. But
I've seen Equilibrium as well. Yeah,
it is extraordinarily stylish, and it has this kind of, it's directed by David Fincher, and it has a similar grimy brown aesthetic as like The Seven or The Game, but it actually has itself a kind of this comic book sensibility about it. It is a bit of a masterpiece of editing, I've got to say. And I like how it doesn't, there is a very, very famous twist in the film. But I like how it doesn't completely rest on that twist. And in fact, what it does is it allows the twist to kind of gradually dawn on the audience. So, I watched it with my wife who'd never seen it before, and she was picking up the clues as to where it was going. And it didn't completely rely on that twist to kind of make sense of everything or whatever. I suppose in a way it's like a bit of a cautionary tale, because the stuff we take for granted, as in the actual material stuff that we buy for ourselves, and it may seem kind of empty and meaningless at times, but if you take that to its logical conclusion, and you do end up tearing down the capitalist hierarchy itself, which is probably not that helpful in the long term. There is something almost, I found there's something almost quaint about the film's central concern about consumerism, because it's almost like, if only life were that simple, that your greatest concern was the emptiness of materialism. And in that way, I think it's the kind of the quintessential pre-9/11 film, because I think it's almost like world events probably overtook that sensibility, that anti-materialism kind of culture. And here's the thing: the Fight Club itself is, in the kind of manner and mood of it's kind of more akin to that kind of like the so-called toxic masculinity of what we'd call the alt-right nowadays. And yet it's interesting that now we're in a position where it's the radical left who are looking to defund the police and tear down civilization. So it is quite interesting to look at it from the perspective of today. But so yes, politically very interesting and a very well-made film. And the fact that it doesn't completely rely on its twist means that it's still rewatchable, and still, an intelligent, smart, and extremely violent film. So there you go.
Extremely violent. Yeah, I must admit I haven't seen it for a long time, but it's cool to know that it still stands up. What doesn't stand up, and didn't at the time, was the PlayStation 2 version of Fight Club, which was absolutely dreadful. And upon completion, you could unlock the character Fred Durst to close your eyes. Before he went into directing.
Yeah, probably just like directing John Travolta. Yeah.
In an orchestra.
It's oh yeah, the other thing is it's got a soundtrack by the Dust Brothers, so it's like real. It's that part is slightly dated, I've got to say, like, because it's very much like kind of roaring breakbeat with electronic sounds over the top. It's very much that like late 90s, early 2000s thing. See also Swordfish. Yeah.
Oh God, yeah. I do weirdly like Swordfish, but I think it's just because I like Hugh Jackman so much. John Travolta's hair in Swordfish is baffling hair, and Halle Berry plays as well. That's always nice.
Mm-hmm.
I watched Hotel Artemis with Jodie Foster, Dave Bautista, Zachary Quinto, and Jeff Goldblum. And have you seen this?
I have, and I like all the people you just mentioned.
Yeah. I quite like this, actually. I didn't know what to expect, but I just clicked on it on the strength of thinking I haven't seen Jodie Foster in a film for a while. So the premise is that the Hotel Artemis is in a way it's kind of like the Continental in the John Wick films, in that it's an underworld safe hospital for the criminals of the city, and it's taking place during a massive riot for clean water. So at the start of the film, the main character, whose name escapes me, is the only name I didn't write down, gets sort of caught in a botched bank robbery, and him and his brother are the only survivors, but his brother's been shot, and he goes to the nurse, played by Jodie Foster, to try and get him sort of patched up. And as this is all happening, there's an assassin there to take out an unknown target, and Jeff Goldblum, who effectively runs all of LA, gets brought in as well. Jeff Goldblum's amazing in this film, like he is in every film. But what really struck me about this film is Jodie Foster looks so meek and old. And she's got this like really heartbreaking little like shuffle she does all the time. Like she's always rushing around, and she's got this kind of like slightly hunched old lady dodder going on.
It's the first film I've seen where she has been cast as an old lady.
Yes, yeah. And the thing is, I thought I think she's in her mid to late 50s, but I'm assuming that they put makeup on her because she looked old. But yeah, really, I love Dave Bautista. Every time I see him in anything, I just love him a bit. And yeah, Jeff Goldblum rocks it. Zachary Quinto is someone who always irritates me just by looking at him. I don't know what it is. It's the same thing with Wes Bentley. I just look at them and get irritated. I don't know what it is, but that kind of works in this film. And I like it. I like the whole thing that it was set in a single block, and there's like a lot of little sort of sub stories that cross over each other. And I liked how tight it was and so contained.
Yes.
So yeah, I was a big fan of this film.
Yeah. Sterling K. Brown is probably the other person you were thinking of, the black guy.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
I don't think I've seen him in any other films. I know that he's in This Is Us, which is a very popular TV series, and he's very good in that. But he's so different in that because he plays like quite a serene, intellectual guy, and not really an action man beefcake at all. So
he needs to take in this film, when he does the bank robbery, he's wearing like a really tasty, tight-fitted, like a grey suit with about 3 layers on, with a waistcoat over the top that is so tight. And there are so many scenes in it where he's like sitting down and he is sweating, and you think, just undo the buttons, Sterling, undo the buttons. and like it just looks so warm in this like hot suit. But I do love it.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a surprisingly decent film, and yeah, the closest thing we've got yet to a Hotel Continental film, I suppose.
Yeah, aren't they doing a TV series?
I've heard about that, yes, years ago, and it still hasn't materialized, so I don't know what's going on with that.
Yeah,
I know they're making the next John Wick films back to back, so got another couple of them coming.
That's fine. Keep them coming, I say. But yeah, Hotel Artemis. It's one of those things that I wouldn't mind if they did make a sequel, because it's anything set in a tower block that's done well, stuff like The Raid or Judge Dredd, and now this. It's kind of, I don't know. It just seems like it's a small enough place for you to have a sort of mental geography of wherever it is, and it has to be a kind of tightly compact story that's quite character driven. But also, there's enough room to explore and be in lots of different locations. So, I like the set design as well. The sort of early turn of the century, sort of clanking huge lifts and stuff. So, yeah, I was a big fan.
Yeah, I don't think it did very well. I think it flopped quite hard, unfortunately. So that's probably why.
Oh, really?
Sequel. Yeah. Yeah, it's a pity because it's pretty solid, really. Let's move on to Gangs of New York then, which is on Prime at the moment. Yeah, kind of continuing on from what I was saying about Fight Club, actually.
Well, actually, I'm just thinking, and it continues from last week, talking about The Departed as well. Is this Scorsese as well?
It is Scorsese.
This is the first film. This is the first film I ever saw with my first girlfriend in the cinema. So I
really
quite well. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was really continuing on that topic of the breakdown of civilization, and the whole, the calls to defund the police, etc. these days. So I think that if anyone who has got thoughts of abolishing the police force may want to watch this film as a warning of what a world looks like when it's just under the thrall of like gangs and corrupt officials, because the best thing about this film in a way is how it shows us a world of such deeply entrenched corruption and violence. It's set in the 1860s, very briefly in the 1840s, but 1860s anyway, during the Civil War, and it's set in 5 Points, which is in Manhattan, sort of down by Chinatown, Little Italy, and Leonardo DiCaprio plays Amsterdam Vallon, who's an Irish immigrant whose father was slain by Butcher Bill, played by Daniel Day-Lewis. Butcher Bill is a so-called American native who runs the 5 Points through violence and intimidation. Now, Butcher Bill does not know the identity of Amsterdam, of Leonardo DiCaprio. So Leo gets in with his gang so he can get close to Bill and kill him. Meanwhile, there are all kinds of other interested parties who are bearing down on New Yorkers. There's this local politician named Tammany, played by Jim Broadbent. He's very amusing. He's trying to get votes, so he's like allying himself with the different gangs. And meanwhile, the US Army is trying to recruit basically poor people to fight the South in the Civil War. And all these elements are basically closing in on each other and getting more ratcheted up and sort of heading towards an almighty kind of collision at the end. I really like this film. I love how it shows how America was built very quickly in very competitive circumstances, and sometimes it really shows how absurd that was. There's this scene near the start where there's this fire in this building, and like a load of different fire engines all turn up at different times, and they're all arguing over who gets the honor to put it out and who gets to basically steal all the stuff inside. So that was quite amusing, and it, that kind of highlights just how ridiculous it is to live in a world where none of that stuff is kind of at state level, but it's all kind of local interests all competing with each other. Now, I mentioned when we spoke about The Departed, I think last week, was it? And that was Martin Scorsese in very kind of quiet mode. It wasn't very flashy. Whereas this is really one of Martin Scorsese's most kind of lavish and beautiful looking films. And he uses a lot of crane shots to capture these enormous bustling sets. Although actually some of the best scenes are the much simpler ones with just people talking. My favorite scene is when Butcher Bill is sat at Leonardo DiCaprio's bedside, like wrapped in an American flag, talking about his father and just he's got this really quietly terrifying sense of menace about him, Daniel Day-Lewis, in this film. Like, he can be talking about the most kind of noble things of honor and stuff, and yet he's this viciousness in the way that he speaks. It is quite scary. I think in the end, the kind of the personal rivalry between Leonardo DiCaprio and Daniel Day-Lewis's characters, it does become a bit lost in all the bombs and the bluster. But in a way, I think that may be the point, really, because it's a story about how New York City was formed. Yet those smaller stories are kind of lost in the pages of history under the weight of this civil war. And overall, it's extremely cynical about America. And I wonder, I was thinking about this because it was one of the criticisms was how, at the time, was how cynical it was about America and how it was forged. And I wonder if this might be a clue as to why it wasn't that much embraced by audiences at the time. Because I think it did okay, but it wasn't like, for the size of the production, it wasn't like a massive hit. And it was actually made in 2001, but it was delayed to 2002 due to 9/11. And I sense that was an event. 9/11 was this event which inspired, especially in American audiences, an enormous sense of patriotism and perhaps this like protective instinct towards the US. And then you get a film like Gangs of New York, which really, set in New York, and it really runs directly counter to that sense of pride. So perhaps people just weren't in the mood for it, possibly. but looking you're looking from afar, it's just a really, really nicely produced film, and it's got a really smart script and beautiful visuals. It's also unimaginably violent as well. So good times.
I remember, like, a lot of, obviously, Butcher Bill, some of the violence is knife work driven, isn't it?
Oh yeah, and it's knife and club based violence. So it's very brutal.
Beating someone to death with a small chocolate biscuit is one of the most violent ways you can go.
Wow. But yeah, I think some of the editing is a little bit. I'm guessing it's Thelma Schoonmaker because she edits all his films, but some of the editing is a little bit jarring. Like when it speeds up and slows down the footage and stuff, it's a little bit distracting. But it's definitely a visually very arresting film, put it that way.
Well, we come now to the first duffer of our talk.
First, but not the last. Trust me.
You know how I am a big fan of Scott Adkins, the martial artist, an action star. Let's call him what he is.
I am aware.
His best film that I've seen is Avengement, which is a really gritty sort of action film set in London. And the worst film I've seen him in is Incoming. And what made this worse is, at the moment, Scott Adkins is doing this in lockdown, this series on YouTube called Art of Action, and he's interviewing people like Mark Dacascos, Tony Jaa, Iko Uwais, all these big names, Michael J. White and stuff. And it's really like an hour long, and it's really interesting to see how they do certain choreography, telling some behind the scenes tales of the larger films and stuff. So I'm completely hip steep in Scott Adkins at the moment, and I was saying to Faye, we need to watch a Scott Adkins film, basically because I need to look at him, I need to see his face. And she sort of finally like gave in and said, okay, check on one. So the one that on I think it was on Netflix, is called Incoming, and it's his most recent film, 2019, and it is absolute shit. There's no two ways about it. It's a sci-fi film which should have set alarm bells ringing. What should have set further alarm bells ringing is that it's a sci-fi film set in a single corridor. This is obviously a film that was made on an absolutely minuscule budget. So the plot is that Scott Adkins, a sort of like a pilot and a doctor, are going up to this space station that houses 6 of these convicts. At the start, you see that like Big Ben gets blown up by terrorists, and then you see someone who may or may not be involved in it just watching a GIF. They say it's a news bulletin. He's clearly just watching a GIF of it blowing up because they have no other footage on repeat. And they take him off. They sort of black bag him, and he wakes up in the space station. And in this space station, he and the other sort of cohorts, they each don't know the others are there, but they just get tortured on a daily basis to try and get information about their organization. And Scott Adkins turns up with this pilot to try and well, you don't know why, but it's just to see if there's any information coming from the space station. For some reason, they've got these people on. Now, there are a lot of problems with this, Rupert, right? The main problem is that why are you torturing these 6 people to find out more information about the terrorist group they work for when they are the terrorist group? It doesn't matter. You caught them. The way they torture them is they make them listen to really extreme metal music at high volume in these little sort of canisters that they kept in, basically. And they just sort of freeze burn them all the time. And when Scott Adkins turns up, and you know Scott Adkins has got this is the level you're working at, right? You know Scott Adkins has an ulterior motive because he's got spiky hair and he's wearing black and he's shaved a bit of one of his eyebrows out.
Right.
So that's the level you're working at. So they turn up and they say, "Oh, have any of these guys from this Wolfpack terrorist group, have they said anything at all of any value for the last half a decade that you've been torturing them on a daily basis?" And the guy who's in control of who's the only bloke on the space station, is like, "Nah, but they're going to crack any minute now." And I don't know. I think they're going to keep stum, to be honest. So what happens is the terrorists kind of break out of their cells, and it's like us against them on the space station. And the film is just boring. It's endless bickering, endless just constant dialogue. And there's a bit in it that I did make it through to the end, but the bit that made me think, I might turn this off, is where they are they get the 3 good characters are locked in this room, and Scott Adkins says, "Well, we can't go out there because obviously they've got tasers. So although we can maybe overpower a few of them, and they've made these makeshift weapons, if one of them shoots us with a taser, we're going to drop. So we need to kind of sort a way around that." And the female doctor has this face that's like, "Oh, I've got an idea," and she rips up a load of carpet. And I thought, "Oh, do you know what? That would work because the tasers would be fired, they'd hit the carpet and bounce off." So I thought she would say, "Well, we'll just put this carpet underneath our, suits, these kind of spacesuits things they got. They'll shoot us with the tasers, and then they won't have any impact." But no, she doesn't say anything, and she just walks around for the rest of the film, holding a bit of carpet in front of herself. So like this triangular piece of carpet, and I thought, you just look stupid. And it doesn't really help the 2 guys who are going to be getting involved in the combat. It's just bad. It's just a bad film. And what's made even worse is that Scott Adkins is clearly can be a decent actor, and he's a very good martial artist. Yeah. But he's in fights with people who I assume have no martial arts training, so it's all kind of diluted. Yeah, it's a film that feels like it should have been made at the start of everyone's careers, not this far through them, and it's quite embarrassing for everyone involved, really. It's just terrible and cheap. So that's Incoming with Scott Adkins. Don't watch it.
God, that sounds like real filler nonsense, doesn't it?
It really, really is, yeah.
Well, okay. Well, you've described a duffer, so I'll do the same, shall I? I'll talk about The Silence.
Please do.
The Silence is on Netflix now. Now, this is a film. Well, okay. I will describe the plot first, because then we can get to the problems. So at the start, these cave divers unleash a swarm of blind flying creatures. And these creatures rapidly take over the world, as far as you can see, anyway.
Has this got Stanley Tucci in it?
Yeah, it has got Stanley Tucci in it, yeah.
Yes, I've seen this, yes.
Yes. The creatures are guided by the slightest sound. The one deviation we get from A Quiet Place is that we see the kind of lead into the catastrophe. So we see Stanley Tucci with his family, which include his wife, played by Miranda Otto, his mother-in-law, his daughter, and his son. The daughter is deaf, so helpfully the family is like conversant in sign language. So things kick off, and people are pretty viciously torn apart by this swarm of creatures. Although individually the monsters aren't quite as threatening as they are in A Quiet Place, frankly, but they come in, there's a swarm. So the family make their way out of the city and they find their way to this handily abandoned house. They're doing okay until this local religious cult rocks up at the door, and then led by a poor man's Michael Sheen, and things go pretty much downhill from there. So as you can see, the plot is very similar to A Quiet Place, and I was looking into this to see if it was a rip-off or a knockoff or what, or it was just pure chance. And I'd have to say they were filmed at the same time, apparently, in 2017.
Okay.
Bear in mind that A Quiet Place was filmed in 2017, released in 2018, quite standard. This has only just been released. It was only released in 2019. It was also written by someone who has written scripts for The Asylum. So we can see
scripts then.
Yes. So yeah, I'm not so sure. I do think it may be a bit of a cash in. You know, The Asylum do get some pretty quick turnarounds on these films. It's not like that level of terrible. I mean, it's got higher production values, but still, I mean, we're talking. It's directed by someone whose credits include the likes of Mortal Kombat Annihilation and Annabelle. Ooh. So anyway, so I'll go through the good stuff first. It's not very long, so that's an advantage for any film. Yeah. Some of the CG is decent enough, although there are places where I felt that practical effects would have worked just as well or better. And unlike A Quiet Place, there is a sacrifice moment at the end which actually makes sense. So it doesn't have that little moment of stupidity, I suppose. Now the okay stuff. Stanley Tucci and Miranda Otto are decent actors, so they hold it together. And the deaf girl, played by someone called Kiernan Shipka, she's fine. So that's okay. Now the bad stuff. The problem is that even if you've got decent actors, they're working with a terrible, terrible script. And it's got very little character development in it. And whatever development there is completely predictable. Yeah, so the guy who directed it, the set pieces are just poorly staged and poorly paced. And the whole... The religious cult aspect is just so dismally lazy and underbaked. It's just like there's nothing. It's so derivative. It's like, okay, mad religious people rock up at the door, and it's like, okay, we've seen that before, and it's like you instantly know they're going to be evil just because they're calm, and it's like, yeah. And as I said, the main guy is just he's like a poor man's Michael Sheen. I think that also that when the religious folks kind of rock up, it points to a key problem in the film's depiction of chronology, because to me it seemed like the complete downfall of society occurs across a matter of like 24 to 48 hours. And which, okay, maybe if it was catastrophic enough, but I'm not sure. This religious sect seems extremely well prepared and well organized, and like they have a very specific plan for how to come out of this. So I wasn't clear. This is the kind of thing that happens weeks or months down the line, I would imagine. But so that didn't really ring true as well. But it might have just been just because the film was poorly written and poorly edited. I'm not sure.
Stanley Tucci and the family in the car, where it's all very sort of tension building and stuff. But then when that cut turns up, it almost feels like just a different film. Like they just said, well, we've done that bit now. They've got to have something else to fight against.
Yeah, it felt like it just felt like it was going through all the usual beats of these sorts of movies. Like the initial realization, the road trip bit, the bit where they're kind of trapped in a car, the bit where they find like a nice house, they settle down, and then it's like, oh well, hang on, we haven't had enough cliches yet. Let's throw in these fundamentalist, cultist, religious people, and it's like, nah, it's really poor. And if you want a kind of high concept, sense-based horror, like A Quiet Place and Bird Box, and you mentioned Hush as well, which I agree with, just better sense-based horror. It does come across, unfortunately, as a knockoff with decent actors.
Yeah, I think you're totally right in the way you said it's just a step above Asylum in that at least it's not knowingly self-referential. It's a bad film that actually tried to be good by getting decent actors in and a decent budget.
Yeah.
I also watched Night Train to Terror, which is a horror anthology from 1985, and I want to say that this is probably one of the greatest films I've ever seen. When I watched it, I had no idea of how bad it was. But when people say, "Oh, it's so bad, it's good," this is on a pedestal, thousands of feet above us, in the clouds for God to gaze upon. Because the things that happen in this film, it definitely passed the 6 test before the credits had finished rolling. It's the overarching story of it is that you've got God and Satan in a small carriage on a train, and they watch 3 sort of stories from 3 individuals, and they have to decide between them if that individual is going to heaven or hell. And what that boils down to is just 2 blokes, one with a fake beard, sitting on a train looking at a TV. It's a very basic story. Also on the train is a band, like a really bad 80s pop band, playing a song called Everybody But You, which they keep cutting back to just entire like minutes long sequences of people breakdancing and strutting and miming. And you say, what? Anyway, so the films are, the first film is about a man who crashes with his newlywed wife into a river. She dies, he gets institutionalized, and then injected with something that hypnotizes him, and then he brings back women so they can be hacked up for a sort of organ farming ring that they've got going on in this hospital. This happens in the first 40 seconds. The editing is pacey. It really covers a lot of ground, and there are sequences in it that I almost don't want to spoil them by talking about them. They are baffling. The way that the film, because I found out afterwards, after watching this film, that the 3 stories are 3 full feature films that are either unreleased or re-edited and brought out under different titles before and after Night Train to Terror. But of course, they've been hacked down to like 15, 20 minutes in length, and they did not care. I'll quickly, if you don't mind, I'll quickly go through each one. It's almost like they edited out the interesting parts. So at the start, he crashes off this bridge, and then he wakes up in this sanitarium, and a nurse says to him, "Oh, dinner's ready. Dinner'll be here soon." And then he says, "Why am I in a sanitarium? I've just been in a car accident," which is a question I also had. I'm glad he voiced it. and then it just cuts to him getting like electroshock therapy. And then it's a really hard cut again to him sort of sitting there open-mouthed and drooling while a man stands behind him holding a needle with a cap still on that says, "That injection hypnotized you." And then it cuts instantly away to something else. It's like, well, that's done. You know why he's doing that now. And then he's just enticing these women into coming back so they can be hacked up by Richard Moll, who's the only actor actually recognized in the whole thing. And the special effects are bad. It's like, you see the shadow of a knife going up and then blood squirting on the wall. Right. At one part where Richard Moll, who plays this kind of like lurch-like orderly, is supposed to be hacking up a woman, you see him lifting up a saw and then like putting it down towards her neck, and the camera pans away to the shadow of the saw on the wall, but the sword doesn't move. You can just see that he's standing there holding the saw, and then blood just squirts all over the wall. And I thought, wow. Yeah, but he's not even like making the action.
He's not motioning to cut.
He's not. And also in that scene, you see him after he's killed the woman walk away, and you can just see one of the crew in shot with just 80s trainers on. Ooh. And he just kind of hops over to the right, but not far enough to be out of shot. You see him from like the waist down. It's just like they do not care what's happening in this film. So that's amazing. The second of the 3 is about a man who meets a woman at a circus and falls in love with her, but she's like sort of betrothed to this older bloke who is part of a death cult. And instead of just saying, "Should we just leave him to it?" she seems to make him say, oh no, you have to join this death cult and survive these 3 trials in which one of the cult will die in order to like win her love. If I was the bloke, I'd just say, you can piss off, actually. I think I'll just go somewhere else. But this is obviously filmed very far apart from each other, because there are sequences in this film where the man and the woman have totally different haircuts and have a totally different relationship with each other from scene to scene. So it's obviously filmed months apart, and because they've cut out so much of the film, you're not sure why they're like, in one scene they're really angry, one scene he's like hitting her, then she's really in love with him, and then she's really jealous of him. But of course these all happen within like 20-second scenes, so you think there's no flow to this. The best parts of this segment are the things the death cult do to like, I don't know what the point is of these things they do. The first thing they do is all get around like a table and say, we're going to put this Tasmanian wasp out and it's going to fly around and sting one of us to death. And it is early stop motion. It is claymation at its absolute best. And it's just flying around with these POV shots, and then it just flies out of the window. And I thought, right, no, fair enough. And then and then they say, right, this time one of us is gonna die, because we're all gonna strap our heads with like a lobotomy sort of thing, like electrocute, the bronze headbands and round our heads, and so we'll get killed. And we'll leave it up to a supercomputer, which, I put it to you, is a box with a single light on it with a man doing a voiceover. And it's just him saying, it'll flash red and one of you will die, and the bloke dies. And it's quite a nice sequence, actually, where he's like, really horrendous sequence where he's like bubbling and bursting and exploding, and everyone's like looking at him and sweating with wide eyes, like, oh, you lucky bugger, you got to die. I don't know why they just don't all blow their brains out, then they'll just get what they want. And the third one was my favorite, because there's about 6 of them in this cult left, right? And they go to it's like a warehouse, and they all get into sleeping bags and hold hands, and then someone just rotates a bell above them, like a huge weight on a rope, that's going up against like a serrated edge, so each time it spins, it's cutting further through it. And I thought, that's not totally random, is it? Because if you think about the way that the huge ton weight is going to swing, it's only cutting on one bit, so it's only going to land it'll fall on one of these 2 people, because that is the nature of what you're doing. And then when they get past that, she just says, I love you now, because we didn't die on those 3 trials, so we can just be together forever now. And it just ends. And you're like, what?
Wow.
But the end, and then the third one, then I won't go into it because I'll be for ages. But that's about someone who is an eternal sort of son of Satan who travels through the ages, murdering people and living the high life. And that has some of the most astonishing claymation in it I've ever seen. Scenes in which not only is the monster claymation, they're in. Say there's a man in a like a graveyard and a huge demon appears. It will cut to the entire scene being claymation.
Oh.
So you've got like little men running around and stuff. The whole film, I cannot do it justice. It's amazing. I cannot believe it was made and released, and it's endlessly entertaining because of the awful acting, the awful dialogue, the absolutely nonsensical plot, the fact that they use every kind of practical special effect they can, regardless of if they can do it or not, and just the editing absolutely makes it. I won't give it away. But there's a sequence in the first bit where a man turns up to an asylum to find his daughter who's gone missing. Is one of the best scenes in cinema history as far as I'm concerned. He is jolly. Considering the situation he is in, looking for his daughter who's clearly been abused and kidnapped, he is tip-tapping his toes. He's all of a time. And that is Night Train to Terror. It's one of the best films I've ever seen.
And that's on Shudder, as I found out. That's almost worth the entry price itself.
I must say, I almost want you to not watch it till we're together again, because I really, really want to watch that film with you. It's I've never seen anything like it at all.
Really? When was it made? You say the 80s?
1985.
Slap bang in the middle.
You know when we watch a bad film and sometimes you'll pause it and say, hang on, and then we'll just explain something out loud.
We'd never get through it.
Yeah, you'd never do it. It's only about 85, 90 minutes long, but there's so much wonder to take in. And it's so fast that I just thought I'm missing huge parts of this, but I don't care because I know I'm going to watch it at least another 15 times in my life.
I'm going to have to hunt down the Blu-ray special edition steelbook of this, aren't I?
I
well.
to buy it. It is up there in my like. I don't think there's another so bad it's good film that's quite like this. It feels completely unique.
Right. Good. The Toolbox Murders was made in 1978. And it sounds like it's probably a bit better than Night Train to Terror. Is it called?
Night Train to Terror, yeah.
Obviously, doesn't quite make sense. Yeah. Yeah. So the Toolbox Murders. This is 1978. It's on Prime. And I suppose it might be grouped in with the early slashers like Black Christmas and Halloween, although it is quite different to those films. Saying that, it does actually start out very much the same as those films because it's got this disguised killer. He's stalking this apartment complex in LA, murdering young sexually active women with various tools from his toolbox. The first 30 minutes is basically just killings. It's very grotty and lurid and voyeuristic, and it was reprehensible enough to earn the video nasty status, as you alluded to earlier. You saw lots of blue screen. Well, I can reveal what's behind the blue screen. It's people getting their heads drilled or nail gunned. It's not that violent by today's standards, I wouldn't say, but for the time it was pretty brutal. It must have been. So anyway, so these various killings, but then the killer kidnaps someone and doesn't kill her. This 15-year-old teenage girl, and then we start to understand his motivation, and it is very disturbing indeed. There's this astonishing scene which must go on for about 15 minutes, but where she is bound and gagged in bed, and he comes in, and he's basically he's explaining to her in very gentle, loving terms almost that basically she is the replacement for the daughter he lost years ago. So it's really creepy in itself. I guess the kind of like the idea behind it is that the women he's killed are beyond the age that his daughter was. So they've become sexually active and they've become, if you like, tainted or corrupted. Whereas this girl, she's younger and she's still pure and innocent. And so he's trying to like keep her in that state. Meanwhile, the girl's brother is investigating the case because the police are completely useless. But he is investigating the case with the killer's nephew, who may or may not know about his uncle's crimes. So yeah, after the kind of slasher film opening, the film turns into this sort of part detective thriller and turns into a kind of psychological Freudian horror. The detective stuff is pretty bland and pretty poorly acted, but the horror element is genuinely disturbing. I know that Stephen King apparently regards this as one of his favorite horror movies. Okay. So, which is pretty good accolade, I suppose. The final act is very, very dark, and the fact that the film actually tries to explain the killer's motivations, kind of set it apart from those aforementioned slashers, or indeed most slashers, really, because they tend to kind of conceptualize or simplify the motivation. The fact that this goes out of its way to really explain where he's coming from doesn't make you sympathize, but it makes it even darker than those other movies in a way. And it's got this really, really doom-laden music, which just sounds like whenever anyone's on screen, they're just about to die. So that's pretty grim. I mean, technically speaking, it's a pretty ropey film, and the performances are highly variable, and the production values are poor. And there are characters who come along and, introduce themselves, but are immediately written out the script. So strange in that regard. But it's also pure kind of grindhouse gold. It's got a really grimy, grainy atmosphere, and all the lighting is either fluorescently stark or just non-existent. And it really kind of delivers in terms of gore and psycho horror creepiness. So this one is recommended. the Toolbox Murders. I think it was remade by Tobe Hooper fairly recently. I haven't seen the remake, but apparently that was quite good. So I might well try and catch up on that. But yeah, the original, I don't think can't possibly capture the grindhouse mood of the original, I wouldn't say. But yeah, that was pretty good.
I haven't seen that because you were talking about the killer's motives being explained, which is unusual, and this is 1978 as well.
Yeah,
which is really early, quite cool. I have to be in the mood for those kind of really full-on slashes, but I'm going to just read about it after we do this, actually, just to refresh my memory, because I'm sure I've seen it a very long time ago. Like, it would have been on VHS. It was so long ago. So, did you watch it on VHS, or was it Laserdisc?
No, it was actually a DVD copied from VHS. So.
Oh my God, blue screen intact.
If only. No, this is on Prime, but I clearly will be buying the Blu-ray.
Nice. I just had a look while you were talking then, and Night Train to Terror is like £6 on eBay for DVD, and I'm so close to buying that. I need to watch it again with you. We'll have to have a special night together.
Oh yes.
The last film. So that's all of your films, I guess. Or have you got one more?
I have one more.
Nice. Okay, this is my final film, and this is a film starring Omar Epps called Trick. This is on Netflix, or is it Prime? I'm going to say... it's on Netflix. So this is a film... it's kind of a slasher film. Set in modern day with Omar Epps as a detective trying to hunt down this possibly supernatural killer, Trick, who dresses up as a sort of pumpkin-headed hoodie teenager thing. And it's called Trick because he calls himself Trick, but as the character's full name is Patrick Weaver. Patrick, you see.
So he did that. Now,
this film isn't very good. Because it is directed by someone. I did have his Patrick Lucia, who has done a few films. In an odd twist, he started off as an editor and edited some pretty big films, and then he did some writing on some pretty big films, and his directing contains both bad writing and editing that he does himself. So I don't know why people hire him, really. So this film starts off with in 2015, and it's like a what's it called, a prom party sort of fancy dress thing, and they're playing a game of spin the knife, a game we've all played at some point.
Spin the knife.
Spin the knife into my throat. So they spin on the floor, and then whoever it lands on, you've got to kiss. He does not kiss anyone. He twists his max around to a creepy face and hacks everyone to death, but he instantly gets captured and taken to a hospital where Omar Epps, the detective, sort of turns up to question him and say, "Why did you kill everyone?" And he escapes from the hospital, gets shot, falls out of a window that's about 20 feet up. And then when they go down, he's disappeared, leaving a trail of blood into a freezing river that's 0 degrees. And they say he wouldn't survive that. And they're probably right. But next year on Halloween, he returns and kills another 6 people. And this happens every successive Halloween up until 2019, where the film mostly takes place, and it's him basically saying, Omar Epps saying, right, I'm actually going to stop him this time. It's an odd film because the killer, Trick, kills more people in this single film than Freddy and Jason and Michael Myers combined in everything they've ever done. He hacks his way past anyone he sees with this kind of little utility life with his own name on that he uses. And whilst some of the deaths are quite cool, and it's a typical slasher, the problem is just that the whole thing about the film saying, is it supernatural? Is it the same guy? Is it a copycat? It's not interesting enough to warrant just these stupid, boring dialogue that goes on. And also, the sound design is awful. I was just constantly fiddling with the volume because people would talk really quietly, and I'd be like, oh, turn it up, and then all of a sudden, like a horror sequence would happen, I'd have to turn it all the way down, and it never felt comfortable.
Oh dear.
When it kind of reveals its cards, it's a bit really, and it's just so many of the things that happen just rely on, like, it'd have to be so well planned. There's a sequence as well where Omar Epps says, "Oh, only I can stop him. He's after me because I shot him all those years ago. He's always there. He's always whenever I turn my back, he's always after me. It's always on my back. Always like a shadow." And I thought, well, he's not, is he? Because he specifically comes up for one day of the year. So for the other 364 days, you're quite fine. It's just on this one day. And if you are convinced that he's after you, why don't you just drive into the middle of nowhere and then it's just you and him, and not hang around frat parties and stuff, really drawing attention and dragging a load of innocents into the mix. So it's just not very good. And it was a bit of a disappointment because when you look at, I'll just actually get up my phone now. If I type in Patrick Lussier, it just kind of expected more than like a really boring. Where are we? Patrick Lussier. So he is a Canadian filmmaker who, So he edited like Drive Angry, White Noise, Red Eye, Scream 3, Halloween H2O, Mimic, and then he as a writer on Terminator Genesis, Drive Angry, Dracula 1, 2, and 3, and then his editing. His directorial stuff where he writes down and edits it is so bad, and you just think this isn't like a first effort. It feels like it should be far better than it is, even as a throwaway slasher, because the editing is just as you mentioned before. There's no you've got no sense of geography where anyone is at any point.
Yeah.
Characters just come and disappear minutes at a time, and then turn up at key moments, and then. Tom Atkins is in it, which is good.
Good.
He is. And I will say that the best part of the film was seeing Tom Atkins, who is about 83, and he's still quite sprightly. It's quite nice to see. He's not like a doddering old man. He looks old, but there's some scenes this where he runs around and he's still quite a good screen presence, which is cool to see.
Kind of helps that he's always looked 83.
Yeah, I actually thought he was getting younger. And Omar Epps as well. I only really know Omar Epps from obviously Def Jam Fight for New York, but also from the House TV series, and he was really good in that. And I wanted him to be good in this, and it's not him. It's just the script and the direction is just so weak that it's just nothing really gets going. So it's one to avoid. Although saying that, there's a lot of deaths in it. And it's quite graphic. So if you fancy that, maybe that'll carry you through.
Yeah, probably not quite enough. I mean, I like a good slasher death, but it's not enough. I don't think. I mean, it was enough.
There's something as well about a film. It's something that irks me as well about this sort of thing. It's when a film thinks it's being cleverer than it is, and it's quite embarrassing. You feel a little bit like cringeworthy watching it, so that's not good.
No. Okay, well, let's take a bit of a juxtaposition here, because I'm going to talk about Hairspray. Not the product, but the film. This is from 2007.
We've already done the sponsorship.
This is the sort of remake from 2007, which is currently on Prime. So John Waters wrote and directed the original film in 1988, which was not a musical, but it was intended for quite a wide audience, especially compared with his earlier works. I've never seen John Waters' Hairspray, but I have seen several of his other films, including the likes of Multiple Maniacs, Polyester, Pink Flamingos, and Serial Mom. And they are all very transgressive and deliberately kind of shocking and reprehensible in their own ways. And no, John Waters, he hasn't made a movie in ages, but all his films that I've seen have been about portraying the marginalized, basically, and the deviants of society. And he tended to approach things in this kind of intersectional way, where he throw in all kinds of deviant behavior into the mix. Hairspray is a lot more wholesome than all that. It's set in 1962, and which is before the repealing of segregation laws in the US. It's about this plump teenager named Tracy, who longs to be on this local daily dance show. And she gets the gig, but it's not enough for her. She wants to abolish the regular so-called Negro Day, and she wants to fight for integration. So the marginals here are basically fat people and black people. That is essentially it. Oh. And basically what happened was that obviously John Waters made this film in 1988. It was then made into a Broadway musical, and this is very much based on the musical. So it's got all the songs, it's got all the choreography and stuff. It's really about, in terms of the plot, it's about how various members of the community kind of react to this integrationist campaign. For example, like the showrunner, played by Michelle Pfeiffer, who looks amazing, she's appalled at the kind of danger to the pure white Aryan representation. The station boss is just going with kind of market forces. The presenter, played by James Marsden, he's just going with the beat of the nation, whatever the people want, sort of thing. Tracy's mother, played by John Travolta, is worried about her daughter's personal safety. And then there's the star of the show, played by Zac Efron, who is worried about his career. So basically everyone has something to lose with this campaign. But if only they could see that in the end, everyone will gain. So I mentioned, you may have noticed that I mentioned John Travolta is playing the mother. Yes. And he does it very well. The reason for this is because the role was originally taken by Divine in the original film. Divine was a drag queen by the name. His real name was Harris Milstead, and he was basically John Waters' muse. He was in most of his films, maybe all of his films, all the ones I've seen, and it was an interesting relationship. And it was Divine is a very unique looking individual. Quite grotesque in a way, but at the same time quite I don't know, there was something about her personality which was quite kind of appealing, that it was like just this complete confidence in the fact that she really believed she was a woman, if you see what I mean, but clearly not. And that was kind of the joke, really. Anyway, Harris Milstead, he died literally weeks after the filming had finished on the original, so it makes sense that someone took up that role. And John Travolta does pretty well. He's obviously got a dance background and stuff, and he does throw himself into it. I'd say the only real casting misstep in the film is Christopher Walken, who plays the father of the girl. He just seems a bit old and a bit lifeless. I'm not sure why they chose him, because he like runs a joke shop as well, and he's not really. He's a bit too dark and kind of glowering to be in charge of a joke shop. But anyway, it's a very bright and positive movie, and it's all kind of based on the energy of Nikki Blonsky, who plays Tracy, the main girl, this kind of plump girl who can dance. She was played by Ricky Lake, I think, in the original. I like how it confronts the kind of segregation issue head on, not in any particular deep way, but it's almost in the way that kind of kids would confront obvious social injustices, and it very much straight head on and highlight the absurdities in those injustices. So that's quite cool. There isn't a whole bunch of drama really, or peril, because 90% of the people in the film are just very kind and decent people. But I thinking it probably would have been a bit of a drag if it had depicted like this constant endless pushback against racial progress. I guess what it's saying is that public opinion often outpaces social systems and traditions. So when things do change, when laws do change, then actually people are ready for it because they're already on board, if you see what I mean. It is absolutely packed with songs. It's practically an opera. It just never stops. Every scene is a song, and some are better than others, and they are a bit samey, but in particular, the last performance is pretty kind of epic. I don't know. I may go back and watch the John Waters original, but I'm wondering if it might feel a bit lifeless without the songs. I'm not sure. But I'll definitely check it out, because I know that John Waters wouldn't have made a film this kind of cozy and safe. So I'm interested to see where he was coming from.
Okay, that's cool. Does anyone sing "I Got 5 on It" by the Loonies at any point?
Unfortunately not, Britt. That one was mistake. They sing every other song in existence except that one, unfortunately.
That means they sing Green Day "Time of Your Life," so I'm not watching that film. Yeah, still listening.
And
to
Ocean Drive by Lighthouse Family.
And Higher by Lighthouse Family, and Beautiful South. Oh God. Right then. So I guess we're at the film of the week moment. Have you got a clear winner for yourself? While I look at mine.
Well, let's see now. It's always the case that I kind of want to highlight the lesser known one, but I think it's quite easy this time around. The Lighthouse is just such a unique and weird, dark and funny little horror film that, I mean, I like the Toolbox Murders, but that was more, it was just a surprise. The Lighthouse, I was fully expecting it to be good, and it was as good, if not better, than I was expecting. So The Lighthouse would be my choice.
I think that's going to be very much a film I'm going to watch soon.
Yes.
For me, yeah, maybe through a mirror or something. Maybe one of Henry's mirrors.
one of Henry's mirrors. You try and sit down and watch The Lighthouse through one of Henry's mirrors, and you just see someone's ass. It's weird.
Yeah, it's like, pull these trousers, put some chaps on with an arse, Henry, for God's sake. Yeah, The Host was good fun. Project Power was good fun. Hotel Artemis was really nice. That was a close. I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that for like a lot of reasons. But I'm gonna have to choose Night Train to Terror, because when a film stops you in your tracks, and as you're watching it, you're already thinking, I have to buy this and I have to watch it with various groups of people. You know that it's a real keeper. It's a real special treat.
Well, that's another line for the poster, then, isn't it? Night Train to Terror. It'll stop you in your tracks.
Oh my God!
That is amazing.
And that single line of dialogue that I forgot even as I spoke it is better than anything in the film. So amazing. Night Train to Terror with Richard Moll. So yeah, that's it. And this will be the last one we do for a while, because you're such an imminent parent. It's unbelievable.
So close now. There is a child bursting to come out.
Bursting to come out and watch Night Train to Terror with us, and a few Gerald Lancasters.
Oh my God, that's really going to stick, isn't it? Okay, yeah. So, well, this is goodbye for now, but we'll be back.
We're going to have such a list of films. Do this.
Yeah,
I love it. Okay, well, love to you and your lovely wife, and I shall speak to you soon.
Okay, take care. All my love.
Bye-bye.
Bye.